Work it, make it, do it, make sense.
Hi everyone, so thanks for giving up some of your lunchtime. So my name's Giles Davies, I work for Microsoft in the Visual Studio team in the UK. I'm a Visual Studio technical specialist. And so I guess very quickly what I want to talk about here really today is how you're not going to see Visual Studio the IDE, but I want to show you how with both the Visual Studio tools, so the back-end tools, but also Azure, how Microsoft has really changed and how we're very happy to and want to support other technologies and platforms other than our own stack. So that's really the intent quickly for today. First part on that is you're probably aware of some of these, but Microsoft, this is my only slide, by the way, after this on a demo. Microsoft really has quite fundamentally changed. It's a very genuine change over the last few years. So I've picked out a few as examples. That one top right is very famous now. Satya, our CEO, in front of a Microsoft loves Linux slide. For Azure, our cloud platform, about 30% of the workload on Azure is Linux. And so it's a very significant platform in terms of how it's being used on our tools and platforms as well. If you're looking at Azure specifically, there is a whole Java Developer Center, and so everything that's available, all of the services are available within Azure, whether that's things like cognitive services or storage or data or compute or whatever they might be, are all accessible and available to Java developers. And so there's an entire Java Developer Center there. And you may not be aware that Microsoft also did things like we've joined the Eclipse Foundation as well. And so we're working to put tooling inside other IDEs. So, and generally, our approach is if there's a community, if that's a useful thing to join, we'll join it and we'll contribute to it. So whether it's open source or not, whatever the conditions might be, that's what we want to do. But what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick demo in the time that we have available, just so you get a sense of potentially what I'm talking about. So let's drop out of the slides. And the example I just want to give you, like most things, there's many variations that we could see here. But if I've got a very simple Java app here, doesn't do anything particularly exciting. But if I log in and remember my password, there we go. Let's try that again. All I want to do is show sort of from a sort of DevOpsy type example is let's go in and make a simple change. Let's go and change that text. So that we can see a change deployed out. And this app is deployed on a machine running in Azure. It's a Linux machine that's running inside our cloud. And if I go and have a look at it, it's actually this guy here, this GD Tomcat that I've called it. And it's a Linux box running inside Azure, and it's got Tomcat and MySQL, that kind of stuff installed on it. So what I want to do here is if I was to... let's go and, that's my dog, there we go, is if I was to go and open up Eclipse, let's come in here, and to make a simple change like that, all I'm going to do is come in here and let's say it's not my dashboard, but the dashboard. This is a Java project. I happen to be using Maven, and the source is going to go back into GitHub. So we support Git within our tooling, but in this case I'm saying use GitHub. So just as an example, so all I'm going to do, let's do this really simply, is I'm just going to say let's just push that change across, say that I've updated the title, and we'll go and push that into GitHub. And then what I've set up, and I'll show you this in a minute, and we'll look at a bit more of the details, but is what I've set up is inside Visual Studio Team Services, which is this set of tooling here. This is cloud-based support for your entire project. And so what I've got here is a dashboard. If I just made it a little bit bigger, I've created a dashboard that's giving me some oversight over things like builds and releases. In this case, you don't need to, but in this case, what I've decided to do is say that actually we're going to watch for any commits to GitHub. And if there is a commit into GitHub, then we'll kick off a build. So we've got continuous integration running essentially here, but actually I've delegated that out to Jenkins. So what I've said is you don't need to be using all of our tools within this stack either. So here what this is doing is saying, yeah, I recognize that there's been a commit. Now go and delegate this out to Jenkins. And so this is my Jenkins instance, and we can see that there's a job running inside here. And if I look at my GitHub repository and just refresh that, we can see that that's the file that I just updated. So my Jenkins instance is just completed. We've got a build, so that's been completed inside there. I can see the build successful. I can go and look at the details of it, who kicked it off, etc. And then the next step that I'm using here is I'm using our release capability to say I'd now like to push that out into my environments. And so what we're seeing here is that this is now in progress in the development environment. And if I dive into release 54, we can see a bit more of that again. So we're in progress in dev. And if I just go and have a look at the logs for a second, just explain what's going on. What this is doing is just basically saying, go and get hold of the output of the build, which in this case was from Jenkins, and then go and, first of all, I've said provision the environment. So we're using, in this example, infrastructure as code, so something we refer to as ARM templates. It's a JSON file that says, this is what I expect to exist in the cloud. And in this case, what I've said is either create or make sure it exists a Linux box, which is running Tomcat and MySQL. And then having done that, which is what it's doing at the moment, is just making sure that exists, is then go and deploy that app out into Tomcat. So here we're doing provisioning, then deployment. We could also run tests, and we could go and sort of deprovision and so on as well. So just while it's doing that, if I go back and look at the definition of that, for example, this is how I've defined it. So I've said I've got a dev, QA, and UAT environment. You can have as many as you like, call them what you want. And then within the dev environment, this is the provision step. And what I'm saying is go and carry out an action. In this case, create or update the resource group. I'm using what Azure terms these ARM templates. And so what I'm saying there is run this or basically use this JSON file, and that is the definition of the machine or the environment that I want to deploy to. So that's what it's picking up on. And then I'm just dropping in a task to say actually deploy the WAR file that was created in the build into Azure, into the Tomcat instance in Azure. And I can choose from a library of tasks. So I could choose as a whole load of Azure-specific tasks, as you might expect up there, but I can also integrate with other tools and technologies. And so it might be, and we've got a lot of customers that use this essentially as an orchestration engine to say when these things happen, then go and do these things. And those other steps might be integrating with other technologies like Chef, or Octopus, things like that. Maybe deploying out into orchestration services like Kubernetes or straight into Docker, integrating with third-party tools, etc. So there's a whole load of stuff you can use. If you can't find it there, then we've got a marketplace, and that's a community site where there's a lot of other extensions. So have a look. If you're thinking it would be nice if it could just do this at this stage, somebody else may well have done that. So you can extend it using that. But if I go back into our release, that should have finished by now, we can see that it's succeeded in the dev environment. If we go back to the logs, we can see all of that succeeded. So if I go back into my dashboard and we refresh, then we can see that my code change has made it into this dev environment. So there's the only Microsoft bit, if you like, that I'm choosing to use in this is the orchestration tooling in the form of Team Services, and Azure in the form of the platform that I'm deploying to. But all of those are adjustable, so you don't need to use any combination of that or anything within that. If I go back to the release, I won't keep progressing it, but it's now sitting and it's saying that I've set up approvals and I don't want this to automatically deploy to the QA environment. I'm saying that somebody should come in and approve that. And so as a pre-deployment approval, I could defer that. So the typical scenario I'd say around that might be, maybe I'm a member of the QA team, I'm a tester, etc., is I'd be very happy to take this latest release, but we're in the middle of a test run, so if we could perhaps deploy it tomorrow night, pick a date and time, whatever that might be, then that can take place and we'll start the test run after that's been deployed. So you can use that not only to just get the pure approvals, but also defer and say this isn't the right time for this to come into that environment. If we don't do that here, but I just say this is okay for QA, approve that, and then that will start the same process, but this time in the way I've set this up into a separate QA environment running in the cloud. So you can start to control that in that way. I guess the last piece of the puzzle, oops, if we go the right way, there we go, is although I don't need it for this example, is how do we also reach back into perhaps the tools you're using, things like Eclipse and IntelliJ. And so we've got extensions that you can download, and this is what we refer to as the Team Explorer everywhere. And so if you want to access things like product backlog items, bugs, that kind of thing, you can access them from within your IDE. So in this case, I'm not really using that. I'm just using Git, the sort of Git level integration, and we're picking it up from there. But there's that ability to reach back into the information that's stored in team services. You can access that inside Eclipse. We got the equivalent integration into IntelliJ IDEA as well, and we want to continue to support with those. So we're not trying to provide a new Java IDE. What we want to do is support the ones that you're using and add in those capabilities so that you can use them. So that's a very quick gamble through, hopefully just so you get a sense of what I'm talking about. Key thing, as I say here, is that we can build, release pretty much any technology to any platform. I happen to have chosen Azure here. We're very happy to support Linux. If you're interested in things like containers, microservices, and a deeper look at the Azure side of this, there's a longer session tomorrow. I think it's the 10:10 session or whatever it is, but there's an Azure session then which will go into this for an hour, so please come along to that if you're interested. But other than that, I just wanted to, let's quickly go back into the slides. And I'm sure I guess the slides will be made available. If you're interested in a sort of case study, I just saw this one actually yesterday by sheer chance. So this is an organisation that's done pretty much what I've just walked through, and this is the output of the hack, that link. So it steps you through how they've set it up, how they've integrated Jenkins, deploying a Java app using JFrog actually, an Artifactory, that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in that, that's there. But other than that, just throw it over to you guys for questions. If you're interested, we have more at the stand. So come, if you want to ask other questions, I'll be at the stand today and tomorrow. There is a Microsoft stand. There's more of us there as well. I've also got a few Azure passes. So it must be some dollar conversion rate. Bizarrely, they're £68 worth of free Azure time. But so if you want any of those, ask me questions. I'll give them away. Other than that, I see we've got 3 minutes left, so I'll say thank you very much for your time. But throw it over to you guys if there's any questions that I can answer in this quick session, if there are any. Yes, far away. Yeah.
So just in terms of the tool that you used to do the builds and the releases, that was the team services.
Yes.
And then it's optional to host on Azure. It's optional whether you use Jenkins or other whatever.
Absolutely, yes.
So just the team services is the thing that links all the.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So to make that a little bit clearer, and sorry because I'm rushing through on time, but yeah, absolutely. So team, it's like most things. There's a great deal of options within that, but essentially what the team services is providing is the overall project support. And so that can include, I haven't got very much set up in this one, that can include things like Kanban boards, product backlogs, all your charting, reporting, all that kind of thing. We also, we do support, I happen to put the JSON files in a Git repository in team services, but I chose to put the source code that I've actually deployed in GitHub. So in fact, there's no source code in this project, but that was my choice. And exactly as you say, when you come to things like builds, if I was to go and set up a build, that's a release, let's come out of that one in a second. If I was to come and set up a build, just to give you an idea of some of the options, is you could say, well, actually, I want to create a build based on Ant, Gradle, Maven, whatever it happens to be, and let's choose one of those randomly. Within that, you can then also choose where is my source code. Is it inside Team Services or is it sitting externally somewhere? So absolutely. So yeah, and we've got a whole range of customers using it in lots of different ways. And essentially, our concept there is use the tools that you find useful. If you've got stuff you're using today, carry on using it. It's not a rip and replace, but let's go and put stuff around that if that's suitable, or use the whole lot if you want to. But yeah, there you go. Money for questions. There you go. I was going to fling it at you, but probably hit your eye or something. So there you go. Any others before I know I'm close on time? Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the same applies for Eclipse and IntelliJ as well. So depending on what you want to do, obviously Azure provides a whole raft of things. Pretty much, yeah, absolutely. So there are, for example, let's say you want to create an app service. Most basic thing would be a web application. Then there's then inside Visual Studio, absolutely, you can do file new project, blah, blah, blah. There are templates for that. And there are also extensions you can add into Eclipse as well, for example, that do exactly the same thing. So yeah, but a lot of that is covered. I mean, there's some really nice stuff, actually, combining all of this. Didn't have time to show it today, but if you're doing, for example, containers, is you can right-click inside Visual Studio and say set up continuous delivery, and it will create the build and release flows for you, pointing you back to the Azure Container Service and that kind of thing. I don't know, but they'll certainly touch on those areas. So yeah, so definitely. But there you go, some free Azure money as well. That's right. Okay, any more? I think I'm probably out of time, but if there's any more, happy to take them. If not, come and see me. We're at the stand, and there's other people covering other areas as well. But thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.